Americans are starving.
More than 10% of Americans are struggling with food insecurity.
About a third of all San Diegans are struggling to afford food they need.
A new study suggests that our biggest money worries these days is the price of groceries.
If you've been to the grocery store recently, you know the prices are getting out of control. In 2022, nearly 44 million Americans lived with food insecurity. That is 1 in 7 people doesn't know if they're getting their next meal. But here's the sobering reality. While those 44 million people were skipping meals, the companies selling the food were popping champagne. In the same period, corporate profits in the food industry hit their highest levels in half a century. So if everyone is so broke, how are they getting so rich? It turns out the inflation you hear about on the news is actually a cover story for price gouging. In today's video, we're going to reveal the hidden history of how the food industry went from healthy competition to a predatory oligopoly. Break down the specific tactics big food uses to sacrifice your health for their profit. And finally, expose the invisible system that turns the grocery shelf into high-priced real estate that you pay the rent for. Let's start with the physical experience of shopping. When you walk into a modern supermarket, your brain is immediately overwhelmed. The average American grocery store carries about 40,000 different items. You see cashew for the health nut, Fruit Loops for the kids, and bare naked granola for the hikers. Psychologically, this feels like a free market paradise. If brand A charges too much, you can just go to brand B, right? But what happens when brand A and brand B are owned by the exact same person? You see, that feeling of choice is an illusion. It is a well-curated hallucination designed to make you feel like you have power. When really, you're just choosing which piggy bank to drop your money into because they all empty into the exact same bank account. But it wasn't always this way. If you shopped for groceries in the 1970s or early 80s, the shelf was a battlefield of competition. There were dozens of independent regional brands fighting for your dollar. But starting in the 1980s, antitrust laws, the rules designed to stop monopolies, were relaxed.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
The government decided that bigger is better, because big companies are more efficient and those efficiencies would theoretically lower prices for you. So the merger mania began. Competitors stopped competing and started marrying.
First, they bought food giant General Foods, followed by Kraft, and then Nabisco. By the early 90s, Philip Morris was the largest producer of food in the world.
Thousands of small companies were bought by medium companies, and medium companies were bought by large corporations. And today, we're left with the survivors. If you trace the ownership of almost everything in the center aisles of a grocery store today, you won't find thousands of companies. You will find the big 10. These 10 giants control an estimated 80% of the world's food supply. And I don't just mean they own the junk food. The strategy is what business insiders call the bear hug, an aggressive acquisition strategy where a massive corporation buys up competition to simulate consumer choice. Let's look at Nestle. Obviously, they sell chocolate. But let's say you want to be healthy, so you buy a lean cuisine. Guess what? That's Nestle too. You want to feed your baby, Gerber's Nestle. You want a frozen pizza, DiGiorno and Tombstone are both Nestle. You want to feed your dog, Purina is Nestle too. Even if you just want a bottle of water, Perrier, San Pellegrino, and Pure Life are all Nestle. But the most effective trick they pulled was buying up the ethical alternatives. For years, shoppers tried to escape the big corporation by buying organic brands. So the Big 10 just bought them too. Annie's Homegrown, for example, the mac and cheese with the cute bunny that looks like it was made on a farm, owned by General Mills. Honest Tea, that's Coca-Cola. Kashi, Kellogg's owns it. Tom's of Maine, that's Colgate. This matters for one very specific reason. When you have true competition, companies fight each other to offer you the lowest price. But when you have oligopoly, which is just a fancy word for a market controlled by a tiny group of players, they don't need to fight. They just need to coordinate. If General Mills raises the price of cereal by 50 cents, Kellogg's doesn't swoop in with a lower price to steal their customers. They look at General Mills, nod, and raise their price by 50 cents too. This is called price leadership. and it's perfectly legal. And this lack of competition is exactly what set the stage for the worst grocery inflation crisis during the pandemic. Which leads us to a big question. If they control the prices, are they raising them because they have to or because they can? For the last 3 years, we have been fed a very consistent story.
Part of the inflation surge is blamed on the ongoing supply chain crisis.
Invasion of Ukraine is part of the reason we're seeing the highest inflation in decades.
Energy prices are at the root cause of inflation.
The story goes like this. We're so sorry to raise prices, but gas is expensive. Wheat is expensive. There's a war in Ukraine. Our input costs have gone up. So we have to pass that cost on to you. On the surface, this sounds fair. If it costs a bakery $1 more to make bread, they should charge you $1 more to buy it. That's just math. But if that story was true, the company's profit margins would stay flat. They would be making the same amount of profit per item, just at a higher price point. But look at this chart. While your grocery bills was skyrocketing, corporate profits didn't just stay stable. They went vertical. A report from nonprofit think tank analyzed the data and found something that should make you angry. They found that corporate profits drove 53% of inflation during the second and third quarters of 2023. To put that number into perspective, in the 40 years before the pandemic, profits only drove about 11% of price growth. Think about that. More than half of the actual money you were paying wasn't going to the farmers. It wasn't going to the truck drivers. It wasn't going to supply chain issues. It was going straight to the bottom line. And this is what economists call greedflation. Or if you want a technical term, it's called profit-led inflation. The Big Ten saw a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Everyone was expecting inflation. The news was talking about it 24/7. The companies realized they had cover. So if they needed to raise prices by 5% to cover costs, they could actually raise them by 15%, and nobody would blame them. They would just blame the economy. There is a concept in economics called rockets and feathers. When costs go up, prices go up like a rocket, fast and high. But when costs go down, like the gas prices stabilized or wheat became cheaper, prices came down like a feather, drifting slowly or sometimes not at all. Because now they have proven you're willing to pay $7 for a box of cereal, why would they ever lower it back to $4? They have established a new baseline. The CEO of Kellogg's literally went on CNBC and said, "We're finding that consumers is holding up quite well."
But what we have seen is that despite the inflationary pressures, despite the ongoing challenges with COVID, that especially in our business and in other businesses, the consumer has proven resilient.
What he's actually saying is that they are still buying it, so we're going to keep squeezing. But here's the catch. Eventually, people do break. Eventually, a bag of chips hit $10 a bag, and you would just say no. You stop buying. The companies know this. They know there's a limit to how high they can push the price before you revolt. So once they hit that ceiling, they have to find a new way to grow their profits. They can't raise the price anymore. So instead, they decided to destroy the food. You have probably heard of shrinkflation. That is when the candy bar gets 10% smaller, but the price stayed the same. It's annoying, but at least it's transparent. You can physically see the bar being smaller. But there's a much worse cousin to shrinkflation that almost nobody notices. It is called skimplation.
Some companies are substituting ingredients in their products, often with cheaper ones. It's called skimplation.
Skimplation is when the manufacturer keeps the size the same and keeps the price the same, but they quietly go into the recipe and swap out real expensive ingredients for cheap synthetic fillers. It is a process called value extraction. They're extracting the nutritional value from the product and keeping the money for themselves. Let's look at the chocolate in your granola bar or cookies. Real chocolate requires cocoa butter. Cocoa butter gives chocolate that smooth, silky texture. But cocoa butter is very expensive. So food chemists figured out they could replace the cocoa butter with vegetable oil, usually palm oil. Palm oil is cheap, it's shelf stable, and is terrible for the rainforest. But it's great for profit margins. Now, legally, the FDA says you can't call it milk chocolate anymore. So look closely at the box. Does it say milk chocolate? Or does it say chocolatey coating? Chocolatey is not a cute marketing adjective. It is a legal loophole. It is the company admitting This is not chocolate. It is brown chocolate flavored oil wax. Let's talk about the blueberry bagels you had for breakfast. Real blueberries are expensive. They spoil. They get squished easily in transport. So manufacturers invented blueberry bits. These are essentially little gummy balls made of sugar, corn syrup, starch, seed oil, and blue dye number 2. They look like fruit. They taste sweet, but they have never seen a blueberry bush in their entire life. They're essentially candy disguised as nutrition. This is happening in every single aisle. Check your salad dressing. Brands that used to use olive oil, which is heart healthy, have quietly switched to seed oil, which is a cheap, inflammatory filler. Check your soup. They are watering down the broth and adding thickeners like modified cornstarch to make it look creamy, so they can use less actual cream. Check your vanilla ice cream. Is it ice cream or is it frozen dairy dessert? If it says frozen dairy dessert, it means there isn't enough milk fat in there to be legally called ice cream. It is almost corn syrup and air. This is the ultimate betrayal of the consumer. They aren't just taking your money, they're actively lowering the quality of your life and your health to squeeze out additional 4 cents of profit per unit. But this brings up a logical question. If the Big 10 are selling us wax chocolate and fake blueberries, why does a new company just come along and make a real cookie? Why doesn't a local bakery just sell their honest product right next to the fake stuff? The market would correct itself, right? We would all buy the better cookie. Well, we would if that cookie was actually allowed on the shelf. Here's the part of the grocery business that almost nobody knows about. We tend to think of the grocery store as a neutral marketplace. We imagine the store managers sits in the back, tastes all the cookies, and puts the best ones on the shelf for us to buy. That is a lie. The grocery shelf is not a meritocracy. It is real estate. And just like Manhattan real estate, you have to pay rent. It is called a slotting fee. If you're a new brand and you want to get your product into a major grocery chain, let's say a cluster of Safeways or Kroger's, you have to write a check just for the privilege of being on the shelf. And I'm not talking about a couple $100. According to the Center for Science in the Public Interest, introducing a new product to a regional chain can cost anywhere from $25,000 to $250,000. And that is upfront, and that doesn't guarantee you staying there. That just gets you in the door. And if you want the eye-level shelf, the prime spot where shoppers actually look, that costs extra. And if you want to be on the end cap, those displays at the end of the aisle, that is premium beachfront property. That costs huge money. Now ask yourself, who has $250,000 in cash lying around to gamble on a new cracker? Well, Nestle does, PepsiCo does. But the local mom and pop shop, the family-owned bakery that uses real butter and organic flour, they don't stand a chance. They're priced out of the market before they even bake their first batch. It actually gets worse from here. There's a practice called being a category captain. You see, retailers, the grocery store themselves, often don't want to deal with figuring out how to arrange the shelf. It is too much work, so they outsource it. They will go to the biggest supplier, let's say Coca-Cola, and make them the category captain of the beverage aisle. Coca-Cola then creates the planogram, the map of where everything goes on the shelf. Do you think Coca-Cola is going to give the prime shelf space to their competitors or to a healthy local kombucha brand? Of course not. They're going to give themselves the penthouse and shove everyone else in the basement. This system creates an invisible wall around the market. The illusion of choice we talked about earlier isn't accidental. It is purchased. The Big 10 paid the rent to keep the small guys out. So when you stand in that aisle, you aren't seeing the best food available. You're seeing the products with the deepest pockets. So that's the reality. The game is rigged, the choice is illusion, and prices are padded with greed. The ingredients are getting worse, and the shelves are rented out to the highest bidder. It feels pretty hopeless, but I promise I wouldn't leave you depressed. Because once you see the matrix, you can stop falling for it. You can't fix the global supply chain overnight, but you can change how you shop tomorrow. Here are a few ways to say no to the system. Number 1, you can shop the parameter. Grocery stores are almost always designed the same way. The processed, boxed, skim-flated food owned by the Big 10 are in the center aisles. That is the danger zone. But outside the zone are where you find produce, meat, dairy, and eggs. These are whole ingredients. You can't skimflate a raw potato. Whole food have no ingredient list. They are the ingredient. The more you stay on the perimeter, the less money you give to the companies selling you chocolatey coating. Number 2, try to embrace the generic. For years, marketing has told us that store brands or generics are lower quality. But here's the worst kept secret in the manufacturing world. Very often, the Great Value or Kirkland brand is made in the exact same factory, on the exact same line, by the exact same people as the name brand. The factory literally just changed the label at the end of the run. You aren't paying for better food when you buy the name brand. You're paying for the TV commercials and the slotting fees. So buy the generic. It hurts the Big Ten's margins and saves you money. Number 3, you can leave the store. If you can, bypass the grocery store entirely for certain things. Go to farmers market, local shops, and independent butchers. I know it's not always convenient, and sometimes it feels more expensive, but every dollar you spend at a local shop is a dollar that doesn't go into the Big Food's stock buyback program. It goes to a real human who actually grows food. The grocery store is designed to be as deceiving as a casino. It has no windows, it's confusing, and the house always wins. But now you have the map. You know where the traps are. So the next time you see blueberry bits on the label, you know exactly what that means. You can put that box back on the shelf, walk away, and refuse to play the game. I'd love to hear your take on the grocery prices, and let's chat about it in the comment section. If you enjoyed this deep dive on food, you might like this video up here where I dive even deeper on a different topic. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.